We UUs who always seek to be rational and use reason in our religion can be a little uncomfortable at this time of year when the mysteries and miracles of the season are brought to the fore. If we hold on too tightly to reason as our highest value, we can miss the magic moments of renewal that these old stories and rituals can bring. So today, I encourage you to suspend disbelief, surrender to the beauty and magic of light, sing joyfully the old songs, open hearts and minds to the mysteries of the old stories and myths as metaphors for what can happen in our lives. Isabel Gare's husband served a UU congregation in Pasadena, California for many years, and she wrote these words about these holy days of December. Oh, fill your heart with fantasy and song. This is the time to dream, and not inquire if it be true, but let our deep desire inflame our vision, make it glad and strong.
Good morning. I'm Pam Collins, and I'm your service associate this morning. Of all the lights we will be lighting this morning, our chalice will be the first one. Please join with me in the words for the lighting of the chalice. They're a little bit different than usual, and they're in your order of service. They're a responsive reading, and your part is the part in italics. In times of darkness, we stumble towards the tiny flame. In times of cold, we seek the warming fire. In times of repression, we reach for the lamp of truth. In times of loss, we pray for the comforting light. In times of joy, we light a candle of joy. Spirit of life, as we rekindle this light, help us find what we need this day.
Our wisdom story today is The Rebirth of the Sun by Starhawk, Diane Baker, and Ann Hill, with images by various contributors to the amazing internet resource FreePic. Circle round, as you have done, and I'll tell you a story about when the sun was born again. It was the middle of winter, and the sun had grown very old. All year long, the sun had worked very hard, rising and setting day after day. All year long, the sun had fed everybody on earth, shining and shining, giving energy to the trees and the flowers and the grasses so they could grow and feed the animals and birds and insects and people. All year, the sun's gravity held tight to the spinning ball of the earth and the twirling ball of the moon and 8 other whirling planets as they traveled around and around and around, until the poor sun was dizzy watching it all. Now, the poor tired sun could barely make it up in the morning, and after a very short time needed to sleep again. So the days grew shorter, and the nights grew longer, until the day was so short it was hardly worth getting up for. Night felt sorry for the sun. "Come to my arms and rest, child," she said. "After all, I am your mother. You were born out of my darkness billions of years ago, and you will return to me when all things end. Let me cradle you now as I shelter every galaxy and star in the universe." So night wrapped her great arms around the sun, and the night was very long indeed. "Why does the dark go on so long?" asked children all over the earth. "Won't the sun ever come back again?" "The sun is very tired," the old one said. "But maybe if you children say thank you for all the things the sun does for us, the light may return in the morning. The children sang songs to the sun. They thought about all the things the sun gave them. Thank you for growing the lettuces and the corn and the rice and the wheat, they said. Thank you for growing the trees of the forests and the seaweed in the oceans and the krill that feeds the whales. Thank you for stirring the air and making winds that bring the rain. Every time a child said thank you, the sun began to feel a little warmer, a little brighter. Wrapped safely in the arms of the night, the sun grew younger and younger. At last the children had to go to bed. We will stay up and wait for the sun to rise again, the old one said. Can't we stay up too, the children asked. You can try, but you will get too sleepy, the old one said. But you can each light a candle, because all fire is a spark of the sun's fire. Put your candle in a very safe place, and let it keep vigil for you as you sleep and dream of sunrise. So the children lit their candles and put them in very safe places, and each flame was a little spark of the sun's fire. And the sun peeped out from between the arms of night and saw all the little fires and began to feel warmer and brighter and younger still. Early in the morning, the old ones woke the children. Together they climbed a high hill and faced to the east, the direction of sunrise. They sang songs to the sun and ran around trying to keep warm. They waited and waited to see what dawn would bring. The sky began to turn from black to indigo to blue. Slowly, the sky grew light. A golden glow crept over the horizon. Night opened her great arms, and in a burst of brightness, the sun appeared, new and strong and shining. For in the long night, the sun had rested well and grown young from the songs and the thanks of the children, young as a brand new baby, born out of night once more. Everybody cheered, and the children jumped up and down. The sun has returned. The sun is reborn, the people cried. And they danced and sang to celebrate the birth of a new day, and then went home to breakfast. And that is the end of our story.
I get excited when I come across common ideas, practices, and rituals in more than one religious tradition. I think that is because it hints at something universal in being human, and light is one of those things. What is more universal than longing for light as the darkness increases? In the comfort of our electric lights and central heating, it might be hard for us to imagine how frightening it was for ancient peoples to go through this period of increasing cold and darkness. Sadly, there are many in our world today who don't have to imagine it. Because of war or poverty, they have no light or heat. But if we can imagine it, or even better, go outside at night and stand or walk in cold or darkness for an extended period, we come to better understand why ancient peoples devised rituals and ceremonies to invite, to seduce, and even beg the sun to return. Religion is replete with references to light as representation of the divine. And I think it means something similar to us in our chalice. The Buddha said, "Be a lamp unto yourselves." Followers of the Buddha seek to become enlightened, which means literally to light up. One is enlightened when one reaches nirvana, a concept beyond all thought and therefore indescribable. When Moses went up Mount Sinai to get the Ten Commandments, his face shone when he returned. And henceforth, whenever he went up the mountain to speak with God, Moses wore a veil, lest he be blinded by God's brilliant light. In Judaism, the lighting of the lamp in the temple signifies the divine presence. According to the Zohar, a 13th century book of Jewish mysticism, the light of the infinite God is so splendorous that no human can see it and live. Adherents seek to attain the Shekinah, the indwelling divine light, in their individual lives. The idea of Shekinah is somewhat similar to what we know today among Quakers or Friends as the inner light. George Fox, the founder of Quakerism, was a physician in 17th century England. He was in despair, and he began to have visions. He saw these panoramic visions of cosmology. He saw the creation of the world. He saw the creation of Adam. He saw the creation and the life of Jesus. And he wrote in his journal, "I saw in that light and spirit, which was before," he means happened before the scriptures were written, "that all, if they would know God or Christ or the scriptures aright," he means interpreting them correctly, "one must come to that spirit by which they that gave them forth," the spirit which gave the scriptures, we must come to that spirit to be led and taught. According to the New Testament, Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the light." Growing up in Kansas, I remember road signs, sometimes hand-painted, that would say, "Jesus is the light of the world." Just a little after Fox lived, we began to describe the 17th century as the Enlightenment, a time when reason began to win out over church doctrine, when science came to the fore. We often use light as a metaphor for knowledge, speaking of becoming enlightened, or seeing in a new light, or saying that's illuminating when we come to understand something in a new or deeper way. Angels always have a circle of light around their faces, and sometimes their whole selves. And some humans, those who are able to see auras, say we too are encircled by light. And now science has some sophisticated equipment which allows them to see the human energy field. At the end of life, people often see light or have a sense of being taken up into a light. And this occurs in the East as well as the West. The Tibetan Book of the Dead tells us that the first thing a dying person is aware of is a clear light. Eventually, the dying person merges with the light, and in their religion is viewed to be liberated or enlightened. And I'm sure all of us are aware of descriptions of near-death experiences in the West, which involve being beckoned by or approached by a bright light. In the season of Christmas, we have the star, which led the wise men to Bethlehem, where they expected to find the King of Kings. But instead, they found only an impoverished infant in a cow stall. And yet, that lowly infant grew up to be venerated as one of the world's greatest spiritual teachers of all times. In the East and the West, light has always been used as a metaphor for the union of human beings with divinity. At this darkest time of year, we surround ourselves with light, and it's a very primal urge related to our very realistic fear of darkness. Without light, we cannot live. Without light, plants cannot grow. Without fire, without heat, we would freeze to death. Without electric lighting or central heating, it seems a rather rational thing that early humans would build bonfires and sing hymns to the sun, hoping to seduce it to return so that darkness would not go on and life cease to exist. I can easily imagine myself dancing around a bonfire on a cold, freezing night. Today, I ward off the darkness in other ways. I bring a tree, long a symbol of life, in from out of doors and string lights on it. I put up lights around the outside of my house. I light candles. I build a fire and sit in front of it, mesmerized by its dancing flames. Science tells us that we can no longer divide ourselves into body and spirit. We are not body and mind, but a body, mind, spirit, with all of our processes interconnected by neuropeptides carrying emotional messages along the pathways of our bodies. Our longing for light is both physical and spiritual. While the mystics might describe our longings for light as longing for union with the divine, science is equally befuddled in describing what is light and what is our relationship to it. We now know that all matter is frozen light, including the matter of which we are constituted. We are literally beings of light, and all things radiate light as they are dying. How ironic that the actual physical process of decay involves emitting light. Everything as it dies becomes light more intensely. I am awed by this, that at the same time we long for light, moving toward the light signals the end of the year, the end of this life. And yet, we know that no energy is lost in this universe. Somehow at death, as our decaying bodies give off light and we become energy, we become one with light. Is it only physical or also spiritual? It remains one of the great mysteries. Perhaps as beings of light, our longing is connecting us to some larger reality. This morning, we invite you to open hearts and minds to the mysteries of light, as symbolized and ritualized and celebrated by our ancient forebears. We reach back in time to celebrations of the solstice, which preceded both Hanukkah and Christmas. Pam Collins will share with us how lighting a yule log at solstice is very meaningful to her. Steve Moskowitz will share how the lighting of the menorah connects him to his Jewish roots and brings meaning to his life. And I will share how the lighting of an Advent wreath in the Christian tradition builds spiritual intensity over the 4 weeks leading up to the rebirth of Jesus, the light of the world.
It was 1986, and I was reluctant to leave Ireland. On a plane, I struck up a conversation with an American couple, mentioning that I had just visited Newgrange the day before and was still buzzing with the wonder of it. "Oh," said the American male, "all this fuss over the so-called advanced technology of the ancients, it's just trial and error." Newgrange, a 5,000-year-old mound built of 200,000 tons of stone and dirt, covering roughly 2 acres. The interior chamber accessed by a stone tunnel at the mouth of which is a small opening called a roof box. Through that opening at sunrise on the midwinter solstice, the first rays of the day enter and travel down the entire passage to light a wall at the back of the inner chamber, upon which are carved designs that can only be seen on that day. Trial and error? I have my doubts. Rather quite an elaborate ode to the winter solstice. One might wonder why. In ancient times, solstice night, well, no, that's not true. All the time, solstice night is the longest night of the year, signaling the dying of the old year and the birth of the new. In ancient times, everyone saved their biggest log until solstice. It was called the yule log, and it was lit to guarantee warmth and light until the long-awaited dawn. Then, as now, the wheel continues to turn. Days slowly lengthen and warmth returns. until at midsummer the journey reverses, and so the cycle continues. Solstice is no decreed holiday, no human decreed holiday. It is a cosmic wonder, timeless and eternal. And it will happen whether we small humans mark it or not. For me, it is the most cherished of celebrations. Lights everywhere, the red and green of holly and ivy, moonlight glistening on the snow. It is a time to remember that I am but the latest iteration of a long line of wise and determined people, and like them, just a tiny speck in this glorious and mysterious cosmos. Being observant of solstice humbles me and fills me with gratitude and relief, knowing that the wondrous dance of the planets is never ending. No Santa, no miraculous baby, just the blessing of the persistent cycle of life and seasons. For me, there is no greater miracle. In honor of the ancient ways, we have lit our own version of the Yule log. And let me share with you a poem called The Shortest Day by Susan Cooper. So the shortest day came, and the year died, and everywhere down the centuries of the snow-white world, people came singing, dancing, to drive the dark away. They lighted candles in the winter trees. They hung their homes with evergreen. They burned beseeching fires all night long to keep the year alive. And when the New Year's sunshine blazed awake, they shouted, reveling. Through all the forest ages, you can hear them echoing behind us. Listen. All the long echoes sing the same delight this shortest day. As promise wakens in the sleeping land, they carol, feast, give thanks, and dearly love their friends, and hope for peace. And so do we, here, now. This year and every year, welcome Yule.
Pam is lighting the candles for Hanukkah on the third day. Tonight at sundown is the fourth night, or the beginning of the fourth day of Hanukkah. That part always confuses everybody. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, asher kiddushanu u'mitzvotov, v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Hanukkah. A famous rabbi was once asked, "Why do you people always answer a question with another question?" I see you've heard this one before. The rabbi scratched his head, shrugged his shoulders, and said, "Why not?" In the spirit of this month's theme, I have tried unsuccessfully to figure out how my personal commemoration of Hanukkah connects to mystery. The closest I've ever come to a mystical experience was when at age 22, I prayed at the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. Was it a religious experience or an overwhelming feeling of connection to my ancestral history? Or both? During the same trip, I saw the illustration that is on the cover of today's order of service on the Arch of Titus in the Roman Forum in Italy. It shows the Roman soldiers having sacked and looted the great temple in Jerusalem, carrying off the great Menorah, probably to melt it down. But here I am at this time of year when we are acutely aware of the fading of the light against the darkness, wrestling again with my internal questions surrounding Hanukkah. something I don't usually do in public, but do a lot in private. I only celebrate 2 Jewish holidays, a non-theistically based Passover and Hanukkah. Hanukkah and Passover are typical of most Jewish holidays. They tried to kill us, we survived. Let's eat. Today and here, I'm concentrating on Hanukkah. It's really a minor Jewish observance made more prominent by its proximity to Christmas. Probably because Jews feel totally left out when the tidal wave of Christmas washes everything before it for about a month, maybe a little bit more. As with Christmas, there is a children's version of the central meaning and an adult version. For Christmas, think of Santa Claus and Rudolph and Jingle Bells. For Hanukkah, it's that silly song about dreidels. The documented historical version is this. It was a time before the birth of Jesus, when the Greek Empire was being absorbed into the Roman Empire. After the Second Temple in Jerusalem was looted by the Hellenistic Romans, Judaism was outlawed. In 167 BCE, the Emperor Antiochus ordered an altar to Zeus to be erected in the main temple. He banned Jewish services and ordered pigs to be sacrificed inside. Antiochus's actions provoked a large-scale revolt, as you can imagine. There was a war between the Greeks and the Jews. The Greeks won and forced their culture on the Jews. A group of Jewish people led by the Maccabees revolted against the Greeks, outfought them, and liberated Jerusalem. The Maccabees found their main temple defiled. They needed to purify it and rededicate it. As part of the rededication, they needed to relight the ceremonial menorah, whose source of fuel was olive oil. Allegedly, a small jar of oil was found which would last only 1 day. Instead, it lasted the 8 days necessary for full religious purification. The Maccabee-led group fought the Greek Empire that was eventually merged into the Roman Empire, holding out for about 100 years. This ended when they were surrounded by their enemies at Masada and committed mass suicide to prevent being tortured to death or sold into slavery. It's not a children's story. What I choose to commemorate is the idea of resistance against the dominant culture, telling everyone exactly what to believe, what to worship, what to think. Freedom to conduct my own responsible search for truth and meaning. Respect for the belief of others, the kindling of one's own light against the darkness. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Hanukkah also reinforces the connection to my ancestral origins, history, and heritage by lighting my candles and saying the prayer that's been said for 2,200 years. The 3,500 years from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, through Moses, the Babylonian captivity, Jesus, the Roman Empire, the Dark and Middle Ages oppressions, Nazis, the founding of Israel 75 years ago, and far too many wars with the Arabs. So in closing, they tried to kill us, we survived. Let's see.
One of the reasons that the Christmas story has endured for so long is that it is rich with the dilemmas of life and replete with metaphors for our own longings, especially at this darkest time of the year. The story has an unwed pregnant teenager rescued by a kindly older man who lovingly adopts the child and raises him as his own. It has a poor family burdened with travel by government regulations and an oppressive regime when the wife is pregnant and ready to deliver. So they make the trip to Bethlehem, but there's no place to stay, and are rescued by a kindly innkeeper who offers them shelter in a barn with the animals. The baby is safely delivered, but only a couple of weeks later, they have to flee an evil king who threatens the baby. They are refugees fleeing to Egypt. It turns the world upside down in so many ways. The God comes in the form of an impoverished infant instead of a rich and grand king. Heavenly beings, angels, declare that we should rejoice, even though this child was born in a stable among the animals. I'm always intrigued that there are also heavenly beings in the sky at the birth of the Buddha. Is that a hint that we might be encountering something universal in the human experience? The Christmas story has rich wise men coming from the east and bowing down to the lowly child, an inversion of the usual expectation for the birth of a royal. It turns so many things upside down, and the anthropologists tell us this is one way of bringing creativity into the society or the system. The celebration of Christmas is a reenactment of a foundational story, just as is the story of Hanukkah and Solstice. And such stories are told every year as a way of going back to our origins, of reminding us what it is we hoped for when the movement was born. In the secular world, think of July 4th. The story that's told there is our foundational story for our culture, our country. Historically, we know little about the birth of Jesus. Much of the version in the Gospels was written generations later and sort of grafted onto the person of Jesus. And it's fun to wonder why, but as Buddha said of the question of the existence of God, it is not a very fruitful question. A more fruitful question is, what can we take from the story that might bring meaning to our own lives? Like all religions through the years, Christians adopted rituals and practices from earlier traditions and adapted them for their own purposes. Religion, think religio, ligature, is our way of binding everything up together. We humans want to know not just how we got here, but why are we here? What is the meaning of our lives? Is meaning given, or do we create it? Or both? One of the traditions that Christians adopted from paganism is the Advent Wreath. We believe it is an adaptation of the pagan fire wheel. Circles are a universal symbol of tying everything together. In the pagan fire wheel, we have the four directions and the center. And originally, it was probably made from a wagon wheel. But sometime around the 16th century, Lutherans in Germany brought the fire wheel into their Christmas celebrations. Then in the 19th century, a Lutheran pastor in Hamburg, Germany, created an Advent wreath for an orphan school where he worked. It was a way of marking the days until Christmas because the children were constantly asking, "Is Christmas here yet? When will Christmas come?" So he used 24 small red candles and 4 large white candles. For the 4 weeks leading up to Christmas, they would light a red candle each weekday and a large white candle each Sunday. The practice spread through Germany and was adopted by Roman Catholics in the 1920s, and then it spread to America and began to be practiced in many Protestant churches as well. During its travels, it evolved into the smaller wreath with 4 or 5 candles that we have on our chalice table today. As practiced today, usually there are 3 purple candles, 1 pink candle, and 1 large white candle in the middle. The candles around the outside represent hope, peace, joy, and love, with the pink representing joy. These are certainly universal concepts in religion. We hope for better times, we long for peace, we welcome joy, and we all need to receive and give love. Today is the third Sunday of Advent, so we will light the candles of hope and peace and joy. On Christmas Eve, Christians light the center or Christ candle. Recall that Jesus was referred to as the light of the world, and it's no coincidence that he was born on December 25th in our mythology, because in Roman religion that was also the date of the rebirth of the sun, S-U-N. Remember that Buddha spoke of enlightenment, which to us can mean not only new intellectual insight, but also an awakening to the interrelatedness of everything. And so we light first the candle of hope. May each of us not lose hope. May hope live on in our hearts. We light the candle of peace. We hope for peace in our hearts, our relationships, our world. And we light the candle of joy. May each of us find joy in the returning of the light and living as Jesus taught. I invite you to turn inward and dwell for a few moments in the silence, perhaps gazing on the light or inviting the inner light. Where in your life do you need increasing light this year? In better understanding of friends, loved ones, co-workers? In medical knowledge to heal disease? In your spirit? Perhaps a lightening of the darkness of depression, and connecting to the Spirit which sends forth light. Where in your life do you need greater warmth? In feeling like you belong? In forgiving yourself and others? In courage to reach out to friends old and new? In making room for a stranger to be welcomed, to be heard, to be sheltered? Where in your life is there a need for peace? In your heart, in letting go of old hurts? In your family, letting go of old quarrels? In our world, how can we be peace, work for peace? Spirit of life, send us light that we might be renewed, refreshed, to be the bringers of new faith, new hope, new peace, new joy, and abundant love. Amen.
Please join with me in the words for extinguishing our chalice. They're in your order of service and on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. So there may be some announcements on the screen. I also have a few. One of which is to remind you that there will be a solstice service on December 22nd at 6:30, and we'll be holding it in the old sanctuary. Walker Book Group, tonight's meeting will be on Zoom only, starting with brief social time at 6:15 and the book discussion at 6:30, discussing Rise Out of Hatred by Eli Saslow. And then from John Sherman, today is the last day to sign up for Saturday's Circle Dinner. I assume you would see John for that. Those on Zoom are encouraged to join a breakout room for conversation and fellowship. You can click to accept the breakout room assignments when it appears on your screen. Those in Community Hall are invited to attend a coffee hour in Channing Hall. We especially encourage guests and visitors to stay with us for coffee and refreshments. We're so glad you joined us today, and this concludes our service.